Hello, people. Welcome back to another awesome anime review by yours truly, Chad Marco. Yes, I know it's been long overdue, but we are yet again doing another anime review finally. So this time I am going to be reviewing Mobile Suit Gundam. Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. Now I think I've reviewed about this is the third Mobile Suit Gundam review I've done thus far. So obviously I'm a fan of the mecha genre. I'm a fan of Gundam. And I'm gonna just go ahead and get it out the way and say this. Mobile Suit Gundam Seed is one of the better. I don't know if I say best, but it's up there. It's up there because if you know anything about Mobile Suit Gundam, there's several series, right? You have Mobile Suit Gundam, the original series, Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta Gundam or Double Z Gundam, G Gundam, Gundam Wing, Gundam Iron Blooded Orphans, Gundam, I think Unicorn, Gundam R something. There's a lot, and I think there's another Gundam that's out now. But there's a lot of Gundam series. I don't know the exact number, but there's quite a few, and I've seen my fair share of them, and I've seen some of the spin-offs as well, like the 08th MS Team and whatnot. And I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised with Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. But I'm not going to reveal too much right now. I'm just, I'm a little excited because I had a good time watching this. So let's get right to it, shall we? So Mobile Suit Gundam Seed was released in 2002, and it is officially the 9th installment in the Gundam franchise. It's the 9th. But remember, from what I understand, there's the main series, right, which typically are about like 40 something, 50 episodes, but they're also like spin-off. They're also like movies and spin-offs as well, so don't get those confused. But yeah, this is the 9th installment in the Gundam franchise. So let's get right to the plot. So the story of Gundam Seed, like most in the series, takes place in the future, officially referred to as the Cosmic Era. During this time, there's a war going on between two groups of humans, the Naturals and the genetically modified and enhanced humans called Coordinators. The Naturals are just normal, everyday human beings with the typical range of abilities and limitations that men have to work with. But the Coordinators are, as stated before, genetically modified before birth. These modifications allow them to far exceed the capabilities of the average person, whether in terms of strength, agility, durability, as well as intellect and adaptability. The first Coordinator revealed himself as a successful experiment after years of gaining various accolades and achievements in a relatively short time. So everyone thought he was a normal human being, right? And so he became a sports star. He went to college and came up with, I think he was a scientist, ended up going out into space. And after he had achieved so much, he had revealed who he actually was, which was a coordinator, which they would become to be called. And he basically told everyone the reason why I was able to achieve so much in a short amount of time and with such a high level of excellence was because I was genetically modified at birth. And so initially the new possibilities that could result from these new super-like humans were embraced, and thus more and more coordinators began to be created. However, over time, tensions began to arise between the Naturals and the Coordinators. On a small scale, Coordinators being so much more capable than the Naturals made them look down on who they considered to be their inferiors. And the Naturals were jealous of the Coordinators for obvious reasons, right? Because you have these individuals who, through the, I guess you could say, being fortunate enough of being genetically modified, they have a big advantage over natural born humans. But on a larger scale, and so here I'm just kind of reading between the lines, right? Now, it's not at all unreasonable to predict that over time, the coordinators will begin to slowly take over and rule above the naturals. Because how would they be able to compete in any given field, be it sports, medicine, science, business, politics, and of course war? Coordinators would have the advantage by far. So you can kind of understand why this tension would come about to begin with, because the simple fact is naturals just cannot compete with coordinators. So inevitably coordinators will become the dominant the dominant faction amongst the human race, you could say. So eventually the tension reached a boiling point, and the original coordinator was assassinated by the naturals. Events like these and more, in particular an event where coordinator space colony was destroyed by a nuclear bomb, would eventually lead to full-blown war between the two groups, with the coordinators primarily living in space colonies and the naturals residing on Earth. Now, there's one detail that I want to cover very quickly. Remember what I just said before about the coordinators, because of them being pretty much superior to the average human in so many different ways, it will be only a matter of time before they overtake natural born humans, and then this whole war starts. One thing that really confirms that point is the fact that the coordinators, even though at the point of the story where it begins, both sides are basically equally matched, the coordinators are actually a much smaller group compared to the naturals. Because remember, coordinators are still a relatively new thing. And another thing about the coordinators is that they have, I don't know the exact specifics. I believe that more details get revealed about this issue later in the follow-up series. But the coordinators, they have issues with reproduction. They're not as fertile. They're not as fertile as naturals. Now I'm not sure. Again, they didn't clarify, but it's either that they can't reproduce naturally, and so they have to always genetically modify infants in order to reproduce, or again, it's something I forgot exactly, but basically coordinators have a big issue with reproduction and increasing their numbers. And so because of that, even though the naturals, or rather I should say, even though the coordinators are typically much better per soldier as far as combat ability, they have less numbers than the naturals overall. So that's why the war between the two is kind of balanced, because while the naturals aren't as capable as the coordinators don't have the same numbers on their side the way that the naturals do. And that's pretty much why the war is kind of, I wouldn't say at a standstill, but it's like they're evenly matched and can't really get ground over the other. Whew. So, at the beginning of the story, we are introduced to Kira Yamato, who is a teenage boy coordinator. He resides on a space colony that is considered to be neutral and has no involvement in the ongoing war, and is also a place where coordinators and naturals coexist. The colony is suddenly attacked by Zaft forces, which act as the military for the coordinators. Now, even though on the surface this colony was neutral, it had been secretly creating mobile suits for the Earth Federation forcing Zav to intervene and attempt to take these new mobile suits for themselves. During the chaos of the attack, Kira attempts to evacuate with the other civilians, but gets left behind with several of his friends. He ends up coming across one of the new mobile suits that was created and pilots it in order to protect himself and his friends from the invading Zav forces. Now, because he's a coordinator, he is able to quickly get the hang of piloting the mobile suit, even though he had no combat experience beforehand. Although I do believe that he has like some knowledge, some prior knowledge of how mobile suits work. 'Cause I think that was part of his what he was studying. But as far as like real life combat, he had never engaged in it before that. So because the Gundam is still considered to be not only a top secret weapon, but also the property of the Earth Federation, he and his friends are forced to go along with the Archangel, which is a highly advanced warship commandeered by personnel of Earth's military as it makes its way to their main base back on Earth. From this point forward, Kira is tasked with being the primary protector of the Archangel as it attempts to reach safety on Earth while continuously being attacked by Zav forces. In particular, a small group of coordinator soldiers who also have advanced mobile suits, one of them being his childhood friend, Athrun. Oh my god. So that's basically the plot of Gundam SEED. Well, that's the summary of how pretty much everything gets set off. It goes further than that as it goes along. Obviously, I don't want to reveal every single thing, but that's the basic plot line of the early stages of Gundam SEED. You know, Kira Yamato, teenage boy caught up in the war between two sides, which is really just a classic story of Gundam anyway. I mean, that's pretty much the first Mobile Suit Gundam story all over again. And I saw that there was some criticism about Gundam SEED story because of similarities between it and previous installments. But look, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But now that I think about it though, Gundam does tend to have similar themes and plot points as its predecessors. As it goes along, you do begin to see like there are like these reoccurring themes and plot points. But I think to a certain degree, I think it's intentional. I don't think it's always a matter of a lack of creativity. I think Gundam just has a certain formula that it tries to work with, right? And so like even the whole like Earth forces versus space force, I mean that's typical Gundam shit right there. But next we are going to discuss the characters of Mobile Suit Gundam SEED. Okay, so the first character is Kira Yamato. So Kira is the protagonist of Gundam SEED. He's a teenage boy, of course, but he is also a coordinator, which, as I said before, is a genetically enhanced human. Stronger, faster, smarter, right? $1 Million Man. So, as you would expect with Kira being the protagonist, his personality is that of a kind-hearted but also courageous young man. The whole reason why he begins fighting in the first place is simply to protect his friends. One interesting thing about him though is that despite being genetically superior to most of his friends, he's not like most coordinators who tend to feel a sense of superiority towards the naturals, demonstrating a certain level of humility and an all-around down-to-earth character. And I think that's something that you notice throughout the series too, as far as the tension between the two groups. Because you look at someone like Kira, because he was raised around naturals and befriended them, he didn't see them as being like lesser than himself. He saw them as being allies. I guess for him, it just felt like being the smartest, strongest, coolest guy in class. Like, I guess it's just the Chad experience for him. So he probably didn't make much of it. But also, like you look at it from the other perspective of the naturals, they befriended him and they welcomed him just like he was any other any other person. They didn't look at him like he was some, well, for the most part, they didn't look at him like he was some sort of a freak or anything like that. So it just kind of goes to show that when given the opportunity to get to know each other, the two sides could get along, but typically the issue was always that there was a certain level of separation and misunderstanding. Unfortunately, Kira finds himself swept up in the war between the two sides, and even though it doesn't take him long to become an elite mobile suit pilot and soldier, he finds it difficult to take the lives of others, even if it's for the sake of his own survival. This particular inner conflict that he struggles with, it reminds me of Amuro from the original Mobile Suit Gundam, who also struggled with the brutality of war and coping with it at such a young age. But I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of Kira. I'm not a big fan of Kira. I don't dislike him. Don't get me wrong. He's just a little bland to me. And I think that that's something that you'll tend to see sometimes with anime protagonists, is that they won't be. It seems like typically you'll get two types, right? You'll get the Goku, goofy but strong, heart of gold archetype, or you'll get the bland self-insert type, right? And Kira to me is just kind of a bland self-insert type character. He's not too quirky, but he doesn't really have many standout, unique personality traits other than just being an all-around good guy. But I don't dislike him. Like I said, he's just bland. And I will say this though, his character development is well done. Seeing him go from a confused kid trying to find his way through a situation where there is no clear good or bad side, to someone who is resolute in his actions and has a better understanding of which direction he wants to go in, that was satisfying. You know, seeing him complete his own personal evolution. He's not a one note character. You know, he has to grow and evolve throughout the series, and he starts out confused and just caught up in a conflict that he doesn't really have the power to sway in any sort of positive direction. And then as it goes on, he sort of finds himself and figures out the direction he wants to take as far as confronting the issue of trying to end the war between the Naturals and the Coordinators. But again, he's not a bad character by any means. Just a little typical self-insert, bland type personality. So the next character is Athrun Zala. So Athrun is one of the major antagonists or / protagonists in Gundam SEED. You can see where I'm going with this. He is the childhood friend of Kira and also a coordinator. As kids, Kira and Athrun pretty much went their separate ways, which would ultimately lead them to taking different sides in the war between the coordinators and the Naturals. Athrun Zala being the son of Patrick Zala, who is the leader of Zath, again, the coordinator military forces. Naturally, he would end up fighting on the side of the coordinators. While Kira, he spent his later years on a neutral colony occupied by both Naturals and coordinators. So Kira has no preferences, but of course he ends up fighting on the side of Earth because most of his friends are Naturals, right? So basically you have two friends turn enemy because of twisted fate. In terms of Athrun's actual personality, he's a very serious type of person. You could say even mature for his age. Compared to Kira, he does seem a bit more sure of himself, at least initially. And I think that has to do with the fact that he has an easier time accepting the course that he's on, because he's fighting for his own kind. He's fighting for the coordinators, and he's a coordinator, as opposed to Kira, who's pretty much fighting on the side of the Naturals, but he doesn't really see the coordinators as enemies because he's a coordinator, right? And also Athrun, he's fighting under the guidance of his fathers. So I think he has a firmer grip on the belief that he's fighting and killing for a noble cause. He doesn't seem to have the same internal struggle about taking lives on the battlefield like Kira does. Again, because he feels like, okay, I'm protecting my people, my coordinators. Right? That's a dumb name, I gotta be honest. But overall, he's a good kid, and he has sound morals. It's just that because he's pitted against the protagonist, and he's mission oriented and not as flexible as Kira is at first, I would imagine that for most viewers, you can't help but root against him at some point, despite really he's a cool character. He's a cool character, but it's just the fact that you're on Kira's side for this ride, and initially he's a major antagonist. So I got to give some honorable mentions very fast. So Athrun is initially part of a 4-man crew who are hunting down Kira and the Archangel Earth forces. And these characters are fairly significant, but I don't feel like I have to really give them a big breakdown, so to speak. So I'll just give them a brief mention. So the first one is Nicole Amalfi. Some of these names are dumb and I can't pronounce them. But yeah, Nicole, he's kind-hearted, friendly, obligatory cute femboy character. Easily the most likable out of the gang, at least initially. The next one is Dirka Elsman. I don't have a lot to say about him, but he's a solid fighter. Just kind of really a bland character, if I'm being completely honest. And then there's Isaac Joel. Certainly the standout here. Hot-headed, abrasive, cocky, a real all-around nasty attitude. The type. He's a great soldier when you need someone to go crazy on the battlefield, but very poor leadership and interpersonal skills. But I will say this. Isaac wins over most viewers over the course of the series, and I'll leave it at that. But that's Athrun's crew in a nutshell. That's his gang. So the next character is, and excuse me if I mispronounce this, because this is one of those names. This Gundam just has some crazy names. Muru Ramius. So I'm gonna call her Ramius. Ramius is the captain of the Archangel warship and the best girl, in my opinion. But a soldier on the side of the Earth Federation. She is pretty much the primary decision maker aboard the Archangel and helps orchestrate the offense whenever they are under attack. Even though she's not a mobile suit pilot, the captains of these big warships in any given Gundam series that has one, they do deserve a lot of credit because they're basically looking at the battlefield like a chessboard and have to make so many adjustments on the fly, all the while taking heavy fire and having to communicate with everyone about what to do next. And she's easily one of the best. And the thing about Ramius, though, is that despite being a capable, experienced soldier, you can tell that the overwhelming responsibility does take a toll on her, which isn't exactly something that would make a character better, but it does humanize her. Because initially she does seem like this sort of like hard ass. She seems like a bit of a hard ass at first, but over time you get to see her softer, more open side. That she's kind of somewhat affectionate and caring, especially compared to Natterley, who is sort of like the co-captain. But Natterley, again, these names. Just call her Natalie. Natalie. But Natalie, the co-captain, she's like the exact opposite. She's an absolute no-nonsense, damn near emotionless robot as far as how she carries herself. So they kind of complement each other in that way. But yeah, as far as Ramius, she's overall a solid, likable character and very easy on the eyes, if I do say so myself. So The next character is Mu LaFlaga. I'm not. That's a name. Mu LaFlaga. Moo. His name is Moo, like a fucking cow. Oh God. Okay. Anyway, Mu LaFlaga is a war hero, or that's how he's introduced. So Mu is one of my favorite characters. Other than Kira, for quite a while, he is pretty much the only reliable offense that the Archangel has outside of his many weapons attachments. He doesn't pilot a mobile suit, at least not initially. Instead, he pilots what is called a mobile armor, which is basically just a futuristic super space fighter jet. But don't get it twisted. He gets very busy in that little piece of shit. Now, Mu is one of the few adults in the series who is relevant in terms of combat or fighting. But not only that, him being older adds a nice balance, because while Kira is still a somewhat immature teen trying to find himself, Mu, on the other hand, is mature and experienced and often provides the much needed advice and perspective that you can only get from an OG. He has a very chill and easygoing personality overall, but seems to have the ability to ease the tension of those around him, because he just never gets too emotional or flustered even when things aren't going their way. But yeah, Mu has a stupid ass name, but he's a great character. And like I said before, he's one of the few adults that can really bang. But that's typical in Gundam, because the spotlight is typically going to be on the teenager or the teenage protagonist, anywhere from 14 to 16 years old, and his primary rivals are typically going to be people his own age. And that's why, even though, and I think it's kind of silly, honestly, the fact that in Gundam so often the best soldiers are these teenagers instead of experienced, grizzled war veterans. But I get it, it's anime, right? But again, I think that's why Mu is such a good character, because he adds that balance of an older, wiser combatant who can, kind of put everyone around him at ease a little bit. So I gotta do another honorable mention, and that's Natalie. I'm calling her Natalie. Natalie Badgerul. These names are crazy. Badgerul. Wow. Like I said before, though, she is the co-captain of the Archangel, and while Ramius is more friendly and flexible in how she deals with people and obstacles, Natalie is a real tight ass, by the numbers type of person, and fully commits to her position in the chain of command with very little room for bending against protocol. She and Ramius do tend to butt heads at times because of the difference in their leadership styles and methods to get things done, especially since Natalie she's cold-blooded in how she executes her plans. She's the type that's always marching forward without really taking time to feel or show empathy. But she is a solid character and a nice black to Ramius's white, so to speak. It's like good cop, bad cop, or in this situation, good commander, bad commander, right? So the next character is Kagili. I'm not gonna say it. Kagili Yula Ata. Oh my god. So when Kagili is first introduced, her involvement in the unfolding events is a bit vague, but she later ends up working alongside Kira and the Archangel crew. So she was already a part of a small group of rebels fighting against Zao forces stationed on Earth. But later, it's revealed that she is actually the daughter of the head of the neutral country orb. So initially you think she's just some ballsy brat who's in over her head, but she's actually a very important figure in the world. But I think that's another Mobile Suit Gundam trope, right? the female character that's trying to get involved in the war, or trying to force some sort of involvement in the war to end it or to bring about peace. I'm sure I've seen that at least like 3 or 4 times in Gundam, but I digress. So she has a very tomboyish type of personality, and in a way she seems to resent her political position, feeling as though it does very little in terms of allowing her to make a difference in the war, which is why she decided to go and try to fight on the front lines in the first place. So similar to Kira, she seems to, on one hand, want to put an end to the war, but on the other hand, she's at a loss as far as how to move forward once she begins to realize that one side wiping out the other isn't the outcome that she wants. And that frustration, that confusion and helplessness is something that Kagami and Kira have in common. And because with Kagami on her side of things, initially she was kind of just like, okay, I'm on the side of Earth, we got to end this war, fuck the coordinators pretty much, right? But as she begins to see, okay, all coordinators aren't bad, you know, they're pretty much just people like us, she begins to have that same inner conflict that Kira has. And I think that's pretty much what connects them in a way, is that they both reach a point where they realize the solution is not for one side to win out over the other. The solution, or the ideal, is to create peace between the two sides. So the next character is Flay Alster. Flay is one of Kira's friends who joins him aboard the Archangel as they attempt to flee from Zaph's forces. She's introduced as being sort of your stereotypical pretty popular girl, you know, QT and all that. And her father is a somewhat important figure in the Earth Federation, so she's a total Stacy. Now, at first, Flay doesn't seem like she's going to be a standout character. In fact, initially, it's like she's a terrible character, right? But at a certain point, her father dies. Spoiler alert, which pretty much mind breaks her. The trauma of that event leaves her mentally devastated, and she's really never quite the same. Even worse, she blames Kira for her father's death and begins to scheme to motivate him to continually fight until he dies, right? So I know she's a crazy bitch, basically. And that kind of becomes her thing throughout the series. Now, I'm not going to reveal too much, but I saw a Gundam SEED thread on the mech board on 4chan. And I heard someone sum it up perfectly. She's the perfect example of a flawed but great character. That's Flay. Flay is like, you won't like Flay, but you'll appreciate what she brings to the story. I gotta say, easily one of the best characters in this Gundam series, but for all the wrong reasons. So, honorable mentions. You have Toll, Sai, and Mirialia, however you pronounce that shit. So those are just more of Kira's human friends that he's trying to protect as he's protecting the Archangel. And not to say that they're doing absolutely nothing. At a certain point, they decide to go ahead and enlist in the military and serve on the Archangel as support and whatever the hell they do at those computers when they're on deck. So, but yeah, those are his gang of buddies. So the next character is Lacus Klein. So she is a coordinator who is also a famous singer, as well as the fiance. The fiance of Athrun. Look, in my notes, just real quick, I got notes about the characters, and I wrote finance. Athrun's finance. Okay, that's just there. But she's the fiance of Athrun. Now, she's a strange one, in my opinion. her personality is overall good and righteous even, but it's the way she expresses herself. It's almost like she's an innocent angel, both feminine and warm and inviting, but also wise beyond her years. Like, she has a better idea than most about the bigger picture and how to move certain people in order to enact real significant changes. Now, I won't give too much away, but there is certainly more than meets the eyes with this girl. But I will say that much like Kira, her goal is to avoid the destruction of either side in the conflict. And she has quite a few people backing her as well. So as you would imagine, her being Atheron's fiance, but sharing in Kira's mentality as far as how to approach this war, there's going to be drama, basically. So Naz. So last but not least, the last character we're going to cover is Ra Le Croissant. These names, I'm going to call him Croissant. So he is the big bad guy of the series and also the Char clone. Now, maybe I've explained Char clones before, but let me just explain it again for people who do not know. So Char was a character in the original Mobile Suit Gundam. He was a very popular standout character. He was easily identifiable because of the mask that he wore. He was an ace pilot, but what made him interesting was that he wasn't firmly aligned with either side. Now, he was on the side of Zeon. Zeon was pretty much what Zapt is, but in Mobile Suit Gundam, the original, right? So he was with Zeon, but he wasn't necessarily loyal to Zeon. Char was a character that always seemed to be plotting and scheming according to his own wishes. And he was, of course, one of the major rivals of Amuro, etc. But basically, Char was a very, very popular character from Mobile Suit Gundam. And I believe that he makes an appearance in Zeta Gundam and maybe Double Z, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, as the Mobile Suit Gundam series continue and you're dealing with completely different timelines or essentially like universes or different periods, they wanted to keep the Char character alive without actually having to keep him alive, so to speak, right? So what you'll see throughout many different Gundam series is that there'll be a character that is based on the Char blueprint, right? And you'll always know who it is because the Char clone of any given Mobile Suit Gundam series, they always wear a mask. They always wear a mask, and typically it's a mask that covers the top portion of their face. And there'll always be an ace pilot, and there'll typically be someone is technically aligned with one side, but isn't necessarily loyal to them. So you'll see them playing both sides, helping out the good guys one moment or showing them mercy, and then helping out the bad guys the next. But again, they always tend to have like this I'm looking out for myself sort of mentality. And Croissant, he is the Char clone of this particular Mobile Suit Gundam series. And so he's a commander for the Zaft forces and is the person giving direct orders to Atheron and his team. Even though he has them doing most of the work initially, he is, of course, a great Mobile Suit pilot. Again, Char clone, ace pilot, that just comes with it. Now, even if you're not aware of how Char clones tend to operate, it doesn't take long to realize that he has schemes outside of the orders given to him. Even as he does his duties for Zaft, you always get the sense that he's working towards some sort of personal goal other than simply trying to win a war. Now, even though he is one of the primary antagonists, his temperament isn't that of a raving lunatic or bloodthirsty soldier. At least not at first. He's crazy. But initially, he does just seem like a rather calm, cool-headed military strategist, right? Again, right in line with the whole Shard clone characters and how they tend to be. Being shown to have a good relationship with Athrun and the soldiers working under him, but he does have a much darker side to him that does not reveal itself until much later. But Croissant is by all means a great antagonist character though, and I say personally, I think he's one of the best Shard clones that I can remember. And I think part of that is because Croissant is just, I think, and maybe this reveals a bit too much, but I'll try not to reveal too much. But like I said before, most Shard clones, they tend to sort of play both sides. And Croissant, he does that. But I think the difference between him and some of the other Shard clones is that he's a legitimate bad guy. Whereas it seems like several of the other Shard clones were more about just fulfilling their personal goals. They weren't necessarily good guys, but they weren't bad guys either. You could sort of consider them to be neutral good, or chaotic neutral at worst. But Croissant, he's one of the few that I can say is actually like he's fucking evil. But he's a great antagonist, great bad guy for the series. So those were the main characters of Gundam SEED. Now there are more characters, as you would imagine, but most of the ones that I didn't mention that are significant come during like the second half of the series and whatnot, and I covered most of the major players outside of a few. So next we're gonna move on to the good, the bad, and the ugly, so stay tuned. Okay, so let's talk about the good and the bad of Gundam SEED. So let's start with the good. So the first thing that I like about Gundam SEED is that I like its display of the moral ambiguity of war. And what I mean by that is that when you look at different wars throughout history, wars can involve two different sides, 3, 4, 5, and maybe some allies over here. This group is allied with that group, and 2 versus 3, whatever the case may be. But war is always one side versus another, typically, right? War is typically one side versus the other. I'm sure maybe we have some 3 ways out there, but for the most part, war tends to be one versus the other. And I think a lot of times when you look at anime or just movies and media in general that tries to tell these types of stories about war and conflict between people, there's always an attempt to create a story of good versus evil. And let me just give you a quick example real fast, right? So there's a movie. Oh, hold up. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Oh, okay. I forgot the name of it. But there's a boxing movie called Cinderella Man, starring Russell Crowe, and it's about this underdog boxer who ends up overcoming all the odds and becoming a champion, right? But I found out something interesting about the story as it's presented in the movie and the true story that it's based on. So in the movie, obviously, Russell Crowe's character, the boxer, the underdog, he's presented as the good guy. And the guy that he has to defeat to get the belt, he's presented as a bad guy, right? But when I looked into it, I found out that the guy that had the belt wasn't even a bad person. In fact, he was very generous with his money because this was happening during the Great Depression era. And so there was a lot of poverty. And so the guy that he fought for the belt was actually very philanthropic and very generous with the money that he would make. He was a saint. He was a great person. But for the movie version, they changed it and made him out to be a bad guy, because obviously that makes the story more compelling when you have good versus evil. And what I like about Gundam SEED, and Gundam SEED isn't the first Gundam series to do this, but I think it does it extremely well. And what I like is that it's not this simple story of good versus evil. When you look at the events from start to finish, you can't really say, okay, this side was good or this side was bad. Things just tended to escalate as one side committed atrocities against the others, right? Now you can say, okay, maybe the natural started it because they assassinated the first coordinator and they continued orchestrating these assassinations. But can you put all of that on all of the naturals, right? These were individuals committing these acts that were not necessarily representing all the naturals. And of course, from there, the coordinators, they retaliate. And then the naturals retaliate. And then that happens, so on and so forth. And then there's a full-blown war. And by the time we get to the point where we're at in the story, it's already just completely out of control. The war is moving forward, and there's really nobody that can stop it. And I think the real genius of Gundam SEED is the fact that you see the war from both sides. Through Kira's eyes, you see the war from the side of the Earth Federation. And you see the good people on that side, such as Mu and Ramius, etc., his natural friends and whatnot. But you also see the bad, right? There's a part where the Earth Federation is hatching this scheme to basically sacrifice a good deal of its military personnel in order to execute this like very what they think is going to be a very damaging blow against Zav forces. But again, it's at the sacrifice of their own people and not telling them. And so you see the bad side of the Earth Federation alongside the good. And it's the same thing with Zav. Through Atherin's eyes, you see the perspective of the coordinators. And again, it's not like just this group of evil, supermen. More or less, they're just like the naturals, except they just happen to be exceptionally talented at pretty much everything they put their efforts towards. But again, you see the good and you see the bad. And at a certain point, even as the viewer, you realize that, the solution is not for one side to wipe out the other. Ideally, you want there to be a truce, a treaty, some type of peace. And I think you can only achieve that by humanizing both sides in this conflict. And I just think that Mobile Suit Gundam SEED does that extremely well. It does it very well. Like, I remember specifically, there's a part, remember I told you, in the early part of the series, Kira is being pursued by Atherin and his group, his team. And remember, I'm on Kira's side because he's the protagonist, right? He's with the Naturals and the Archangel, right? So I'm rooting for him and the Archangel crew. And I can't wait for him to kill one of these goddamn, at least catch a, like, he had already caught a couple bodies by then, but I want him to take out one of Atherin's crew because they keep harassing and harassing and harassing the Archangel, right? And I'm like, I can't wait for him to kill one of these motherfuckers. And it finally came to a point where he killed one, and I was like, damn, I didn't want him to die. But that just goes to show that, and I'm sure that was done intentionally, because it kind of hit me by surprise that he died. But then I remembered before he died, they were showing his home life. They were showing his personal life and his family, so that by the time his inevitable death would come, you would actually feel sorry for him, because now you don't just see him as this soldier that's bullying your little protagonist. You see him as an actual person. And when you see him die, it's sad because you've grown to, I wouldn't say you've gotten attached to him, but he's been humanized and shown to not be a bad person. And you don't want to see people who aren't bad get killed. It's just, there's nothing fun about that. But to me, that's one of the prime examples of why this series is so good at what it does, as far as, again, showing the moral ambiguity of war. It's not always as simple as good versus evil. Sometimes things just get so out of control that things escalate to the point of a full-blown war. And oftentimes people caught up in a war, it's not like they enlist and sign up to be evil. Sometimes you get drafted. Sometimes you get caught up in the propaganda of your superiors and your leaders. And you can see a lot of times, there are a lot of moments in the series where it was obvious that the soldiers on either side were just trying to get revenge for their fallen comrades. And so it also shows the tragic cycle of revenge, and how you kill him, then he kills you, and then right? That whole cycle. And I think, again, that's just what Gundam SEED does extremely well, even compared to other Gundam series that has similar themes. So another good thing about Gundam SEED is that it has a great, excellent finale. Gundam SEED has a great finale. Now, for the most part, it's a good anime throughout. But I would say the last 4 episodes are legendary. And so much happens. So much is at stake. And it's an absolute roller coaster ride. And I've seen quite a lot of anime in my day. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But even with some of the better anime, you don't get a finale like Gundam SEED. Gundam SEED really just takes the cake for me as far as an anime finale. Again, those last 3 or 4 episodes, truly, truly amazing. I can't say too much because that's just I'm giving away the end, but a fantastic finale. And so last but not least, what I like about this Gundam series is that Kira likes pussy. Kira likes pussy. Spoiler alert, he gets some pussy in this anime. Yeah, I said it. And the reason why I appreciate this so much is that, and I've talked about this before, and I think one of my issues with anime and manga is that a lot of times the protagonists, they'll be in situations where they have several girls pining for their attention, trying to trying to get with them. You know, they might be a little tsundere, they might be a little yandere, right? Playing hard to get or just playing crazy. But you'll see a lot of shows where the male protagonist has several girls that like him. And yet he'll be playing this whole aloof protagonist routine where I'm focused on my goal and not the hoes. And look, I feel you on that. That's my whole lifestyle. So I can't really blame you. But you can't make every protagonist the same way. Somebody gotta like pussy. Somebody gotta want some pussy. And Kira gets some pussy in this anime. And it happens relatively early, I might add. And and look, this goes beyond Kira just getting pussy and whatnot, right? What I really like about it is that it's the whole relationship between Kira and the girl that he ends up having relations with, because really they have a toxic relationship. If I'm being completely honest, it's an interesting but obviously toxic kind of relationship between the two of them. It's awkward. It's so different compared to what you see in a typical anime. Even the fact that they are together and they get together so early and they do have a relationship, that is just something that you don't see a lot of in anime. A lot of times, if there is some sort of romance, then it builds up slowly over time, right? Like they don't actually get together until, let's say when the show starts off, the protagonist is like 14. They don't get together and get married till he's like 25 or some shit, right? But I really appreciated this because I just thought it was a more realistic portrayal of relationships between teenagers. Kira's willingness to engage in sexual behavior, like a healthy post-pubescent teenage boy would do, right? He wanna get pussy, and the sort of messiness and drama that comes with a teenage relationship, all of those elements were there, and I couldn't help but appreciate that. I like that, and I got to give Gundam credit for that, because I think that was one of the more interesting portrayals of a relationship that I've seen in anime, to be honest. So let's get to the bad. So first, I do believe that this Gundam was a bit too predictable. And I have to chop some of that up to the fact that I've just seen so much anime, and anime is a genre where there are just a lot of reoccurring themes. There are a lot of reoccurring plot points that occur between different anime and manga. And so when you get to that point, like just for example, when I was reading Chainsaw Man and what was it, Power Girl, whatever the hell her name is, tried to feed him to the Bat Demon. And I said, oh, I know where this is going. Even though she betrayed him, he is going to forgive her, slay the Bat Demon, and they'll be friends. And then that's, again, it's the whole Goku Vegeta, you're my enemy, but now you're my friend after I show you. Again, predictable anime shit. That's very typical. And I think this anime, there were quite a few moments where it was just very obvious what they were doing. There were quite a few times when I just knew somebody was going to die, for example. I would look at certain episodes and I say, okay, they're setting this character up to die. Why are they giving this character so much attention all of a sudden? Why is he trying to pilot a mobile suit? Right? It was just too predictable sometimes what they were trying to do. I mean, they were effective at what they were doing, but I think sometimes it was also just too predictable. And I'm telling you, I called at least 3 or 4 character deaths before they even happened. I felt it. I was like, okay, they're setting him up to die now. And so the other thing that I don't like about it is that it lulls somewhat in the middle. There is a dull spot. It's a four. I think it's 48 episodes, and around episode 20, that's when they reach Earth and they go to this desert area. And that part really is not very good. That's definitely the low light of the series. And it's interesting because when I went to look on the mech board and people were discussing Gundam Seed, they pretty much said the same thing. That when they went to the desert, they didn't like that part. And it's not that it was bad, but I think that it just doesn't live up to the quality that is established in the beginning and after that part. Because other than that, the anime is a slam dunk. But that desert part, which is like, I want to say, what is it, like roughly 6 episodes? Maybe like 6 to 8? What is it? I'm thinking it's about 6, 7. It had to be like 6, 7, 8 episodes, something like that. And again, it's not bad, but looking back, that was definitely the low light of the whole series. But other than that, I don't really have much to say about Gundam Seed as far as what was wrong with it, because it really did just do so much right. So next, we are going to discuss the score. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap it up and score this baby. So for Gundam Seed, I give the action a 3.5 out of 5. The action is very good in this anime, but you have to understand Gundam is also a very story-driven anime as well. So there is a good mix of action as well as storytelling and plot. But I think that if there was more of a focus on the action, and I'm not saying that that's how it should be, it could have been up to about a 4. But I give it a 3.5, but that's you kind of have to split it because it's so story driven. And that leads me to the next point, which is the plot, which is also a 3.5. I think that with Gundam Seed, you get this perfect blend of action and storytelling wrapped up all into one. Now, it's not too exceptional in either category, but it is good overall. Next, the animation, also a 3.5, is well animated, but I must say that I watched the HD remastered version. So remember, this is an older anime. It came out about maybe like 21 years ago or so. So, and by today's standard, that's damn. It's kind of crazy to think now that early 2000s anime is 20 years old. That's kind of crazy. Okay, but anyway, but yeah, the animation, I give that a 3.5 as well. No complaints there. The music, I give it a 3 out of 5. It does have a good soundtrack. There are a few songs that I went and downloaded myself. But I think most of the music, it more so just fits with the anime itself. It really helps set the tone, whether you're talking about moments of people just conversating and different story parts, or even the action parts with the fighting and space and whatnot. They have good high up-tempo energetic music to go along with that. So it has a good soundtrack. Comedy, 1 out of 5, but that's not a bad thing. It's not a funny anime. It's not meant to be funny. Ichi, I give it a 2 out of 5 because Kira likes pussy. I'll just leave it at that. And so overall, I give Gundam Seed a 8.5 out of 10. 8.5 out of 10. It could have been a 9. It could have been a 9, I think, if not for that desert part. And I think certain aspects of the story leave you unsatisfied as well. Now, Granted, there's a follow-up series called Gundam SEED Destiny that I haven't watched yet, but you have to separate the two. And from what I hear, Destiny is much worse than Gundam SEED, the original, right? I'm gonna watch it eventually, but I heard so many people say that it doesn't live up to Gundam SEED, so or what you could consider the first part. But ignoring Gundam SEED Destiny, I think if Gundam SEED was 60 episodes, didn't have, and the desert part was better, yeah, I think it could have been a 9 out of 10. But I think as good as the finale was, I think that like I wouldn't change it. But I think, in fact, maybe 60 episodes is too much. I would say if it was like 53 episodes, if it had like real talk, if it had like 5 more episodes, it needed about 5 or 6 more episodes. If it had that, then I think, yeah, it could have been a 9 out of 10. But I think where it falls short of becoming a 9 for me is that, again, the plot, the story does leave you a bit unsatisfied at the end. It's kind of like, again, it's a great finale, but I just think there needed to be more of an explanation for certain things. And you don't really get that. Maybe Destiny provides that, but from what I hear about Destiny, so that was my Mobile Suit Gundam SEED review. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I think next I'm going to start working on my Chainsaw Man review, because everybody's watching Chainsaw Man, and you know, I got look. I'm not a big fan of it. I read the first 3 volumes, thought it was kind of mediocre, but hey, I gotta get on that bandwagon for them for the algorithm. So you might see some Chainsaw Man coming soon. So I'll see you guys later on the next anime review. So, Johnny.